Welcome into the Mental Moments podcast with your guide, Healing Hottie. Mental Moments is where we walk through life experiences, yours and mine, finding the ingredients to make life sweeter, a conversation to consider our minds, bodies, and soul, moving with gratitude, one step at a time. We are only really in control of ourselves, but managing through life, trying not to control everything is a daily battle we often lose. Today, we are exploring how we start to shift our mindset to understand what's out of our control. Let's walk through this together.
Welcome in. How are we feeling? I really want to know. Make sure you drop it in the comments. I am feeling pretty good today. Now, Mental Moments is a conversation, honey. And today we are talking about how to control ourselves when there are so many things going around us that are completely out of our control. This is something that I constantly have to revisit myself, and there's some tips and tools and tricks that have worked really well for me. But there have also been things that I've picked up and learned along the way that I'm still learning that I want to share with you today. And I hope that, this will encourage you to stay grounded in the midst of all the things that are going on. There's so many things that are happening every day that can kind of shift and change, our moods, our well-being, and all these things. And so let's dive right on in. I have talked quite a bit this season and even last season about how God led me to start a business where I'm offering support and operational systems and project management services to a few different businesses over the past, I'd say, about 9 months. And the business has shifted and is still shifting and changing from when I started, from the idea that was planted in my mind to do how I wanted to do it, and up until now. One of the things that I have noticed and has been pretty well identified and talked about in therapy is that I tend to position myself to be kind of the hero or the savior in the situation, or rescue, or the solution. That has never worked for me, but I try to make it work for me. When I started this business, I knew there were things about myself that I couldn't afford to do in a professional sense anymore, but also like personally, like kind of separating the two and still at my core, like, who am I? If that makes sense. So much of like the savior complex and things that I would hone in on and focus on and overwhelm myself with on a personal sense and jump into any and everything, I knew I wasn't going to be able to say that personally any longer, but I absolutely could not continue to do that professionally. But unfortunately, I did. The other thing about myself is that I try to, in project management, or if you're in risk management, that kind of thing, you start to consider all the things that could go wrong, and you want to have as many safety nets in place. And because my personal life for a long time has just kind of been this up and down roller coaster, and I wasn't really sure, and I wasn't really rooted, and I wasn't really grounded, it kind of ebbed and flowed. And so when I started in this business, I positioned myself and pitched myself in a way that said, like, hey, I can take any and everything, I can kind of roll with the punches, I can ebb and flow and all those things. And I think those are great characteristics to have. But what would frustrate me, because the other side of this Healing Hottie coin is that she was very much like, but it has to go this way. Like you could give me, you could put me in the middle of a minefield, but we've got to go this exact way. You just need to follow my steps, kind of thing. And so it was like understanding there were so many things outside of my control and wanting to like manhandle that in a unhealthy sense. And honestly, if I am being really transparent, I think I learned that from both of my parents. Like, they were still are very hardworking people. And I learned their work ethic and their ability to kind of plan and strategically, put things in place from just watching them work over the years. But that didn't quite work at home when you've got, kids and they're their own individuals and there's all these kind of things. And so the way they would kind of manage through that wasn't always like the best. So now fast forward, understanding that through my 20s of like, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this like sense of control. I would then buck that with like controlling myself and my emotions and all those things. That in a nutshell was pretty much where I was throughout childhood, teenage, 20s. Now I'm in my 30s. So I started working with businesses and all these sort of things. One of the biggest elements of project management is timing, right? In order for X, Y, and Z to happen, A, B, and C had to have flowed pretty well and have happened by this certain time. But when you're dealing with multiple people, different aspects of their life that have to be incorporated and are considered, now let alone my own, just managing that can be a little bit of a challenge. And especially in the event space, when you're doing event planning and you invite all these people, you've planned, now for these few things to flow well. And then, during or after the event, you find out, okay, that did not flow so well. And so how do you manage that? How do you maintain your sense of self-control, your sense of value when those things don't flow well? Because I will say for some time, I was struggling with continue to see my value when things did not go well, right? I would kind of diminish myself, which is, I feel, is a huge element of like self-control, is how do you see and value yourself no matter what has happened? And I want to take a moment and park there, right? Many times when we're faced with different events, and whether they're traumatic, good, or just okay, things that have happened in our lives, and some of this is outside of our control, right? When we think back to our childhood, but that tends to like shift and change your core beliefs. It can have the ability to shift and change, how you see and value yourself. There are so many ways that we can go with this, right? But at the core, one of the major things that I continue to work on is like, in any room that I show up in any situation, in all those things, who am I? Who must I remain as? What are the things that should not shift that at all? What are some things that happen that need to rise up another element that within me that may not, necessarily be there, right? And so, for example, I love to, let's give a really light example, and then I'll give a little bit more of a serious one. For me, I love to sing. And so when there's music playing, when there's nothing going on, I'm usually humming or singing or, some sort of tune is flowing out of me. No matter where I am, that's just a core element of my being. It's just, I love to flow in creativity and in song, no matter where I am, whether the situation calls for it or not. In a more serious sense, one of the elements of my life that I feel very strongly about is that everyone should have a safe space, because not everywhere is going to be a safe space. And so if you have a safe space to go to return to seek out, I think that is super, super important. And I don't mean in a retreat kind of sense. I do mean in a sense of just like peace. Like everyone should have a space of peace. Sometimes there are children that do not ever get to experience that from the very beginning. And so it can be very difficult to, know what that looks like later on in life. And so one of just like my core tenets is like, I like to carry myself as a walking safe space for children. And so if there's ever, if I ever saw a lost, and this gets into the savior thing a little bit, but stick with me. If I ever saw like a lost child, or even just a child just like was in the grocery cart with their, parents or grandma or something, they're looking at me, I smile. But that's a core, I don't care what it is and where I am and what I'm doing. That's just a core part of me kind of thing. And so understanding that now, it's like, yeah, of course, like that makes so much sense. But when we think about control, when we think about those moments where we've lost control, it really kind of like starts and ends with self, right? And how we value ourselves no matter what has happened. The other thing is that it's really important in spaces of like self-control that we begin to, if we're not there, that we begin to grow into a space where we have room to feel all of our emotions without necessarily putting action behind them, right? And the appropriate action behind them. I'll give you like a really good example. So I had, and I won't name the client or anything, but I had a client. They were having difficulty getting their client to pay them, which in turn led them to have difficulty in paying me. All the while, they were still giving me tasks to do. I was like, at first, in a graceful and compassionate sense, I'm like, well, this is not their fault. Like they have no control over when their client pays them. But in the same sense, I'm like, but I still have to make sure that I'm able to do everything that I need to do. And so this kind of drug out for a few weeks, and I was very kind of like boxing in my emotions about the situation. I was like, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to do anything out of anger or frustration. So I'm just gonna chill and kind of see how they move and all those things. But again, they were still like expecting me to do a certain level of work, and to which I said, I'd love to help, but I need to be paid. I need to be compensated, because this was not just going to require me to like sit at home and do the work. No, this was going to require me to leave my house and do physical labor. I was going to have to travel to do these things. And so it was really like, yeah, no, I really have to get paid. And so with that, and I was just getting started out with this business, y'all. And one of the ways that like I really had to be mindful about control is when I am communicating, and specifically through text messages. And because sometimes my tone, the directness in my sentence, the tone will come off a little bit more aggressive than I ever actually said it. And we can have a whole other conversation about intention and assumed intent and tone, right? Especially through text messages, but that's for another day. And so I'm really trying to be mindful, but I'm like exhausted and I'm tired, and I'm like, come on, like I can't. And so it really made me, because I had past situations where people were not compensating me in an appropriate timing with appropriate communication. So I have clear expectations on what's going to come, and I have bills due that I have like fired off very like angrily. I was very short with them. I really didn't want to do that, but also not saying anything wasn't the answer. So I let this go on for about a week or so, a week and a half. And then I just said, well, who am I? Right. And I tried to be a very clear communicator with expectations. That's what I was looking for. Expectations and understanding. And so, okay, now I need to give what I am asking for. And so I did. I said, hey, would love to help you, but like at this time, like I can only do this. And then if I'm not compensated, I'm not going to be able to do any of this. And I have to know by this time, because I have to make some moves. I got to do some things. I got to make I got a plan, all these things. And we kind of went from there, and I ended up getting my money and we ended up doing the event. But it was also a situation where we brought our relationship in that way to a close. It could have gone very differently, right? Had I not said anything, had I not communicated my expectations, had I fired off, from a personal perspective versus a professional perspective because I was frustrated. And so in thinking about that scenario and thinking about life as it is now and thinking about you, right? We must remain in control of ourselves. That's the only thing that we can control is ourselves. Even with the saying, accept the things that you cannot change, that does not mean you can't have feelings about it. Like even in that, I was like, yeah, I'm frustrated. This is not the optimal. I've wasted more time chasing down getting this invoice paid that I could have used for other things, right? That was not an easy process, but I'm able to talk about it now because I gave myself the space to feel. I talked about this in 2 episodes back. It's the same thing with grief. Even if you don't make the space for your emotions in that situation, you try to stuff that down, it will come up in other ways. And so I think that's a huge aspect of self-control, that you have to acknowledge your feelings in it. And I don't mean gossip about it. I don't mean badmouth them. That's not what I mean at all, because all of that is tied to, those actions are tied to an emotion. But I also don't mean to pretend like it's not happening either, because that doesn't help at all. The other thing is that, and this is a big one for me, but like even in being in control of myself, we're not in control of everything that goes on and what happens. I truly believe that God is in control. And that is something that is just like anchors me of like, it's going to work out some way, somehow. It may not be the way that I envision it, but it's going to work out, even if it's like, you know what, keep your money. And it's not worth the time sort of thing, and be blessed. Or if it's like, I got to take you to court because you didn't pay me, kind of thing. It honestly, it's going to work out how it's supposed to. And you don't have to carry all of that. And the last thing that I'll say about when things are flowing out of your control is that as much as you have like a million and one factors that play into the decisions that you make every day, so does everybody else. And I don't mean that to diminish your experience. I say that to encourage you to ask questions, because a lot of times it is the assumptions, the lack of really knowing all the details and what happens, not having the appropriate context, that leads to these like moments that where we deadlock, or these moments where it boils over, right? But if we inform ourselves of what's going on and why, then you can make the best decision of, okay, well, what do I need to do, even if that decision is nothing. Sometimes the decision is to do nothing, and truly to do nothing, and not out of spite, not out of anger, not out of quit, but truly in a sense of, no, I have to sit back and I have to wait. I have to sit back and I have to ask more questions here before I make the best decision. And that's okay, because I think we've grown to a space quite a bit where we always think that we're supposed to be doing something, be productive, be the answer, be the change that you, we can't. We can't possibly do that. We can't constantly be going. We have to rest. We have to eat. We have to be well. We have to live life. We have to just exist sometimes. And that has been the biggest transformation. I'm really thankful. When I was led to start this business, when I was led to start this podcast, I didn't know that I was going to end up here in this space of like, no, we just gotta we gotta do things in a different way. We have to do things with a level head and a controlled mind, and show up as our full selves all of the time, like no matter what. And I'll give you a good example of that to close us out. I was talking with another client recently, and they were telling me about how they had to take a minute. They had to take a beat from everyday life. And so they went away for a week. And when they went away, they gained all this clarity, and they were getting, all of this wisdom. And one of the things that they said that they were called to be a regulator, and not necessarily controlling everybody else, but truly embodying what they want to, help others achieve. And if I'm all over the place, how in the world can I expect to show up in a space that will reflect that will see me and be like, okay, well, we can calm down a little bit. That stung so much because I'm still in this space now where I'm like working through how to like facially regulate when I'm frustrated. Like you can see when I'm frustrated on my face or when I'm in pain. And when I'm like physically in pain, granted, I can't hide that. But when I'm just like frustrated about something, like just that energy radiates. And so if I panic, if I'm frustrated and walking into this situation frustrated, that's absolutely going to have a domino effect. And again, I'm not in control because I could be as calm in the world and everybody else could be panicking. But again, I'm in control of myself. So when things are moving and shifting and shaking and all over the place, start with you. Start with understanding what it is that you're feeling, what's happening in that moment, and what you need. Take a minute, take 5 minutes, take as much time as you need to make sure that you are well with where you are. And that I don't mean that everything is perfect, that I mean that you have a clear understanding. And then seek to understand. Seek out context. Seek out an opportunity to ask questions, to be more informed, and then make a decision. And that is how we stay in control no matter what. And know that it is truly a blessing to not have to be in control all of the time. You don't have to carry it all. You don't have to have the answer. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to save everyone. Just move in a space where you know yourself. You know that you have the ability to ask questions. If they don't get answered, you can still go with that to make the best decision for you.
Remember, this is a conversation, so make sure that you follow us on Instagram at Mental Moments and Healing Hottie so we can keep this conversation going. I pray what took me 12 steps takes you 3. Keep building a life you will be proud of, no matter how long it takes. Until next time.